Calls for justice and police reform have echoed across the nation. But how far have we come in making any changes in 1 year's time? Joining me now live over Zoom is Natalie Burke, the president and CEO of the national nonprofit CommonHealth ACTION. Natalie, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
1 year later, in your opinion, what changes have you seen?
I would say the biggest thing that happened was awareness. I think that for many people, they knew that racism existed, but I don't think that they ever witnessed it with the severity of what we saw when George Floyd was killed. And since that time, that awareness has led people to seek ways to engage and to actually change as individuals and then to look at how they can change their communities.
What do you think about the momentum right now of the response 1 year later? And do you fear that we respond only to tragedy?
I do fear that, but I also feel like I have a fair amount of faith in human beings and human relationships. So I think what's happened over the past year certainly is that we've seen changes to local policing, things around and efforts with regard to ending no-knock warrants, chokeholds, the use of tear gas. And so there has been efforts at a local level to address ways to change policing to make it more effective and to make it more rooted and based in community policing. In addition to that, though, we've seen corporate entities actually to put dollars behind this effort to achieve racial equity. So you've seen JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Kaiser Permanente all commit billions of dollars to uplifting Black and Latino-owned businesses and to creating opportunities for Black women in various sectors, as well as the supply chain and diversifying their supply chain. So I think that we've seen policy change in a number of different ways.
If people want to support the cause of equality, do they need to make gestures or donations, or do you recommend starting small?
I would say that it's really focusing on equity more than equality. And equity is this idea of fairness and all people having the opportunity to get to their best possible outcome. I think that requires them to start small in the sense of starting with themselves, educating yourself, being in relationship with people who are unlike you, who maybe don't live the life that you live or come from your background, is the opportunity really to root out and to put an end to prejudice. We prejudge people in the absence of information. That's a lot harder when we're in authentic relationships.
How do you recommend offering grace to someone who isn't really at the point you want them to be?
I think that's a great question, Megan. I think it really is rooted first in empathetic listening and the ability to communicate effectively and to coach one another. And so how can you do that with compassion and with understanding? It's by pulling that person aside and having a very real and sometimes difficult conversation, but doing that from a place of understanding that we're all on a journey. No one is perfect in understanding how this all works and comes together, but if we're working on it together, we can coach, we can support, and hold one another accountable, quite frankly.
Natalie, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me.